Imagine this for a moment. You've been talking to someone for weeks, maybe even months. The conversations flow effortlessly. You share late-night messages, inside jokes, and those small personal details that make you feel like you truly understand each other. Little by little, a sense of connection begins to grow. You might even start imagining what the future could look like. Then one day, something shifts. You send a message, no reply. Hours pass, then a day, maybe two. You check their social media and see they're still active, posting, liking, viewing your stories. But somehow, they've gone completely silent with you. Suddenly, your mind goes into overdrive. You start replaying every conversation, analyzing every message, wondering if you said something wrong. Did I come on too strong? Did I miss a sign? What makes ghosting so painful isn't just rejection, it's the absence of explanation. When a relationship clearly ends, our brain can begin processing the loss. But when someone simply disappears, our mind is left in a state psychologists call ambiguous loss, a situation where someone is gone, but there's no clear closure. And the human brain struggles deeply with unfinished stories. A cognitive pattern known as the Zeigarnik effect shows that our minds tend to obsess over things that feel incomplete. Without an explanation, your brain keeps searching for answers, replaying the past like a puzzle that refuses to solve itself. To understand why this happens, we have to look beyond the silence and into the psychology of the people who disappear. One of the most common psychological reasons people disappear without explanation is surprisingly simple: a deep fear of confrontation. At first glance, it might seem confusing. After all, how difficult would it be to send a short message saying, "I don't think this is working out," or "I'm not ready for a relationship right now"? But for some people, that conversation feels far more threatening than it appears on the surface. To understand why, we have to look at how the human brain processes emotional stress. Deep within the brain lies a small but powerful structure called the amygdala. This region plays a crucial role in detecting potential threats and triggering the body's survival response, commonly known as the fight-or-flight reaction. For individuals who are highly uncomfortable with emotional conflict, the idea of telling someone disappointing news can activate that threat system. Their brain begins anticipating awkwardness, anger, guilt, or emotional intensity. Even if the situation isn't physically dangerous, their nervous system can still react as if it is. When that happens, the brain instinctively searches for the quickest way to reduce discomfort. And often, the easiest escape is simply to avoid the conversation entirely. In psychological terms, this is known as conflict avoidance. Many people develop this pattern early in life, especially if they grew up in environments where disagreements led to punishment, tension, or emotional withdrawal. Over time, their brain learns a simple rule: conflict equals danger. So instead of facing an uncomfortable conversation, they choose the survival strategy their mind believes is safest. They disappear. While fear of confrontation explains many cases of ghosting, there is another psychological factor that is often overlooked: emotional overload. Sometimes people disappear not because they are intentionally avoiding you, but because they genuinely do not understand what they are feeling themselves. Human emotions can be incredibly complex. For some individuals, especially during stressful periods of life, those emotions can become overwhelming and difficult to process. Psychologists use the term alexithymia to describe a condition where someone struggles to recognize or describe their own emotions. While not everyone who ghosts has clinical alexithymia, Many people experience a milder version of this difficulty when they are under emotional pressure. Imagine the mind like a computer with too many tabs open at once. At first, everything runs smoothly. The conversations feel exciting, the connection feels new, and the emotional investment is manageable. But as the relationship begins to deepen, when vulnerability increases, expectations grow, and future possibilities start to appear, the emotional load becomes heavier. For someone with limited emotional awareness or bandwidth, this can feel overwhelming. They might feel confused, anxious, or even trapped by feelings they cannot fully explain. And when people cannot clearly understand their own emotions, explaining them to someone else becomes nearly impossible. In that state of emotional overload, the brain often chooses the simplest solution, shutting down the source of pressure. Instead of processing the relationship, they withdraw from it, not because they necessarily stopped caring, but because they did not know how to handle what they were feeling. To truly understand why some people suddenly disappear from relationships, we have to look at one of the most influential frameworks in modern psychology: attachment theory. Attachment theory suggests that the way we connect with others in adulthood is deeply shaped by our early childhood experiences. The emotional patterns we learned from caregivers, how love was given, how comfort was provided, and how emotions were responded to, quietly shape how safe or unsafe intimacy feels later in life. One attachment style that often plays a role in ghosting is known as the avoidant attachment style. People with avoidant attachment didn't necessarily grow up without love, but many experienced environments where emotional needs were dismissed, ignored, or even criticized. Over time, they learned an important survival rule: relying on others can lead to disappointment or loss of independence. As adults, these individuals often still desire love and connection. That is why the early stage of a relationship can feel incredibly intense. They can be charming, attentive, and deeply engaging. In the beginning, everything feels exciting because the relationship hasn't yet reached a level of deep emotional vulnerability. But as intimacy grows, when conversations become more personal, when emotional closeness deepens, or when the future of the relationship starts to feel real, something changes internally. Their nervous system begins to interpret that closeness as a potential threat to their autonomy. Psychologists call the mental responses that follow deactivating strategies. The brain starts highlighting flaws in the other person, questioning the relationship, or convincing itself that being alone is safer. And in many cases, instead of communicating that fear, the avoidant mind chooses the fastest way to restore emotional distance. It disappears. While fear and emotional overwhelm explain many cases of ghosting, there is also a darker psychological side that cannot be ignored. In some situations, disappearing without explanation is not about avoidance, it is about control. In psychology, researchers often refer to a cluster of personality traits known as the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Individuals who score high in these traits tend to approach relationships in a very different way from emotionally healthy people. For them, relationships are often less about genuine connection and more about validation, influence, or personal gain. For someone with strong narcissistic tendencies, attention and admiration function almost like psychological fuel. Psychologists sometimes call this narcissistic supply. Once they feel they have received enough attention, or once they find a new source of validation, they may simply discard the relationship without warning. In these cases, ghosting can function as a subtle form of psychological manipulation. By leaving without explanation, they maintain control over the narrative. The unanswered questions keep you thinking about them, replaying memories, and searching for meaning. Ironically, silence can become a powerful tool. Without closure, your mind stays attached to the mystery. In this context, ghosting is not accidental. It is a calculated withdrawal that allows the person to avoid accountability while quietly maintaining psychological influence from a distance.
That's unbelievable!
You're trending everywhere right now.
Being ghosted can leave a deep psychological wound. When someone disappears without explanation, the mind naturally tries to fill in the blanks. You may start replaying conversations, questioning your actions, and wondering what you could have done differently. Over time, this kind of uncertainty can slowly erode your self-esteem. But here is an important truth that psychology repeatedly confirms. When someone ghosts you, their behavior usually reveals far more about their internal world than it does about your worth. As we've explored, people disappear for many different reasons: fear of confrontation, emotional overwhelm, avoidant attachment patterns, or even a need for control. In each of these cases, the silence reflects their limitations, not your value as a person. One of the hardest but most liberating realizations is this: closure is not something another person gives you. It is something you create for yourself. Waiting for an explanation keeps you emotionally tied to someone who has already chosen distance. Real healing begins when you accept that their silence is, in fact, the answer. Their inability to communicate is the closure. And the truth is, the right person will never leave you questioning your worth or chasing clarity. If this video helped you understand the psychology behind ghosting, consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the human mind. And if you've experienced something like this, feel free to share your thoughts or story in the comments below. Your voice might help someone else realize they're not alone.